gentlemen, we have none other than architect Ernesto Bedmar this morning right here at FOAID 2024. Let's have the loudest round of applause. Please help me welcome on stage architect Ernesto Bedmar.
Thank you very much, FOAID, for inviting me. I must say that it is an absolutely privilege to be able to be here sharing some of my experience of my work. The presentations always sounds very fanciful and make us to look bigger than life, but to be honest, it's a very simple work, the one I do. My office is an extremely small company. We are only 12 people, including the cleaner. And therefore, we have make a decision and a choice that we only get involved in residential projects. It is a choice and something that after 40 years of running my company, I feel very happy to spend my time in that field. Couldn't be other fields, but I mean, destiny is something that sometimes comes, sometimes no. The title that I have put for tonight was actually the garden as the main protagonist of the work. Was a chosen title, not necessarily means much, but it's actually the importance that we put in the gardens in all our projects and how we just manipulate in many ways circulations and so on to be able to achieve that point. Being educated and growing up in Argentina, we only have the 4 seasons, and that means that our homes have to be a little bit protected for summer, protected for winter, etc., etc. When I arrived to Singapore and I discovered the tropicality of the place was to me something really fascinating because of the weather condition. But more than the weather condition was as well the greenery. I mean, the landscape that we have in tropical countries. And somehow my work trying to emphasize the beauty of the weather and the tropicality that we have in this part of the world. Not in Delhi, but I mean in probably south of India. I have chosen 5 projects to show it to you. We will start with a very sort of this was the understanding for me studying architecture, in which the home normally will be a sort of a solid kind of a space, taking advantage of all the different sizes. Being in the tropic, that changed completely my attitude toward how a project should be designed. And from there on, I decided to divide this particular block into different small blocks, trying to generate a space, a sort of a large courtyard, sort of speaking, in which will allow different things. One of them, to create a bigger garden. Secondly, to have a smaller kind of blocks, which will allow for ventilation and illumination, which is a very important part in the tropics. And from here on, I begin to generate several projects. The first one was actually my first home that I designed in Singapore as an architect. And we are talking about probably 30 years ago, in which was this very small plot of land, sort of speaking, in which the main aim was actually to create a circulation from the beginning to the end of the project, which was able to generate a circuit in which people will be able to see every aspect of the property. And not necessarily to see it all at once, but basically discovering little by little, going through this particular circulation. The circulation is completely open to the environment, in which, I mean, was purposely done in that way. I think so that the level of rain and the sun, et cetera, is quite attractive. And I wanted to celebrate that as much as possible. The entrance of the house, I mean, again, in that particular time when I was beginning to work as an architect in Singapore, I was really fascinated by the work of Jeffrey Bauer, a Sri Lankan architect, and somehow I was trying to emulate, sort of speaking, his type of architecture. So using all elements, columns, and doors to represent into my homes. From this circulation, this entrance that we have, I mean, we needed to create this very large roof, which was actually going to be the creator of my circulation in a very natural manner. So from there on, when we enter this property, we just discover basically the main space of the house, which was the courtyard. In this case, we selected a garden to be a water garden. So the entire center space of this house was this water body, which was as well the swimming pool of the house. As we can see here, the roof have a very traditional aspect, very large eaves, and these eaves are the ones which actually create the proper circulation of the house. This is actually the middle, the center space, and as we can see, all the different elements of the house are facing to this courtyard. And of course, we have greenery space into different direction of the house, but the center, the heart of this house was this water body. Again, different part of views. I mean, the roof structure creating these 4 pavilions, sort of speaking, and how moving through the side to the very last pavilion in the end. The circulation, as I mentioned, which is actually the creator of the circulations, expressing in a very natural meaning all the structures. The connection in between different spaces. And again, I mean, this center space, which I think so is the most relevant space in this particular house, and which generated from here on many other different typology that I have been using throughout my profession. Different spaces, all of these areas are completely naturally ventilated, but at the same time, it is a need for air condition, as sometimes of the year is unbearable the heat. So here we can see, I mean, the circle space in that particular wall, which is the penetration of the air condition into the space. And the same happened in this bedroom. The air condition, as we can see, is coming from the circle above the door. From there on, we just passed through a much recent project. This project was done only a few years back. But interesting enough, it's actually the same philosophy that I used about 30 years ago. I mean, the use of pavilions and the creation of an open circulation was a completely different language. In this case, a much more contemporary sort of approach. Once again, this is the circulation. I mean, how to reach the different parts of the house, we need to completely move around the site. From the outside, we normally tend to keep our projects very quiet. That means it's very difficult to see the projects from the street side. We believe in privacy. We believe that actually the people in the house should enjoy without the disturbance of any public eyes. Here is a section showing the use of a very important, a very simple roof structure. And again, a sort of a cantilever which has 4 meters, which is creating the circulation and which is creating a garden area. We will see later on in the photograph. Just general view. This is actually the access to the house through this particular space, which is the circulation proper of the house, completely open to the elements. That means to be able to reach from one end to the other one, we have to really appreciate the environment. In this case, I mean, how we beginning to enter into the house, the landscape is becoming the most important element. Again, I mean, the landscape is created by doing this 3.5 meters cantilever circulation, which allowed us for this upper garden, which we will see later on from the upper bedrooms, creating the feeling that we are in the ground floor all the time. The element of water, which is very much used in all our designs. Again, in this case, is the swimming pool, and there are many other body elements to the house. We will see it later. The full totality of the house, but as we can see, the circulations are completely through the open areas. And the transparency of the architecture, which we reckon that is very important in the tropical conditions to be able to allow for ventilation 100% as much as possible. And of course, that transparency to be able to appreciate the greenery that we generated in this project. This is a city project in Singapore. Next to us, we have high-rise buildings, and yet we are able to achieve this kind of situations, which we reckon that is very important to bring as much greenery as possible into our homes. Again, I mean, we can see how the transparency is taking place throughout. So the communication, the visual communication through the house is very open, very sort of generous. Different spaces. This is actually the gazebo of the house, completely open to the elements in a very tropical condition, but I mean, really useful. Again, the materiality of the projects, I mean, dividing what is the swimming pool to the sauna, sort of the whirlpool of this house. Again, the swimming pool. The general view and the materiality that we are using, the timber screen is obviously to be able to manipulate to cover the different situations of the movement of the sun. The detailing of all our projects are very carefully studied, very carefully look into it. And again, I mean, we can appreciate in these floor plans actually how the simplicity of the design created by 3 elements once again. And this is actually showing the upper portion of our property. And actually, we can see all the garden that has been created, which is actually the circulation below. This is actually what happened in the upper portion. In certain extent, the use of timber, which is very large. And this is what happened in the upper portion of our homes, is actually creating this garden, which gives us the feeling of being completely like it was a natural ground, no difference. And this is actually all the bathrooms of the house. Again, I mean, the landscape is growing by the day and making actually a tremendous impact to the house. And once again, the transparency and the use of water, as we can see, all the pavilions have not only the swimming pool, but as well the use of water, which create a very refreshing kind of atmosphere in the tropicality of the city of Singapore. Again, the greenery in the evening and actually the transparency of all these spaces. From here on, I'm just showing another project, which is actually in Indonesia. This is another villa, which has a very complicated size situation, in which actually, again, the circulation for this project was actually a very intricate situation, but because of the site was so difficult, we only have the center portion of the house which enjoy a sort of a garden. The rest of the units, I mean the bedrooms, sort of speaking, they didn't have a general view, so we decided to create a very much an internal view and the privacy that was required for the bedrooms. So we decided to allocate the 4 of them in a situation where they enjoy the internal spaces. And the main unit of the house, that's meant for the owner of the house, which is here in the upper portion, of the plan, which that one, yes, have an attractive view as well. So this is what happened when we arrived to this project. We have a very elongated circulation. In this case, because it's actually in Bali, and the weather conditions are quite positive, very seldom we have many rains in this part of the world. And therefore, we decided that all the circulations will be completely open to the space. And the main structure of the roof situation, which is a very standard, very simple architecture. Again, the sections is a very traditional form of architecture belong to Bali. From there on, we have actually the main access into this property, in which basically is a sort of a sense of perspective, showing different pavilions and different elements, which is guiding the person coming into this property to be able to move through it. So from the main entrance, we see the main sort of arrival point, which from that arrival point, we have a choice to go into the private parts of the project or to the more public spaces. Once we arrive to this pavilion, once again, we have created a very strong sense of perspective. Interesting enough, this perspective is created in the direction of a volcano, which is a very important element for the Balinese people. Unfortunately, because of the mist and so on, the volcano from this level cannot be seen very clearly. So we have created this particular staircases, which is leading us into the main living room of this property, in which from that particular point, we are able to see this volcano and this view, which is actually very important for the Balinese people. From there on, which has moved through the different circulations that we show early on in the plans. Each circulation has different characteristics and different approach to the vegetation. This circulation is leading us to the different pavilions that we saw early on in the plan, which is the bedrooms area for these properties. And each bedroom is a completely enclosed capsule in which have a total privacy from the outside. We thought that the bedroom should have that characteristic. We didn't enjoy very good views from this particular point, so we created our own views. As we all know in Bali, having a shower into the outdoor is very important. So we created all our bathrooms with the bathrooms outside, completely open to the element. And this is the part of the house which is actually in the living room and the dining room. We have the living room in the upper portion, as I showed early on. And in the bottom, the swimming pool, enjoying, of course, the best view that the house has. Again, different aspects of this particular space, and the materiality in which we have used is basically all second-hand columns in wood and stones as well from Bali. The gardens, which is actually the only portion of the property which have an open view, so that for all these public areas are looking into these particular large spaces. And again, this is actually the view in the evening of these living room spaces, and once again, the entrance that we have early on. Illumination is something to us extremely important, and we do them as well in the office. From here on, which is going to another project in Jakarta, which was quite difficult to achieve, was a very narrow entrance to the site and a very elongated site, which have a golf course at the very end. So something which looks difficult to approach at the beginning to us was actually a beautiful opportunity to create a series of courtyards and gardens to make people to be able to penetrate throughout the project to arrive to the end of this property where the main areas like living and dining rooms are located. Again, the architecture in C is a very simple approach, a pitched roof, very traditional from Indonesia. And this is actually what happened with the circulation from the entrance, from the drop-off point of the car, leading all the way through to the end of the project, which is where the living dining rooms are located, taking, of course, the most exciting views of the golf course behind that. This is actually the entrance. Once again, very discreet, very simple, which allow us to come into this drop-off point. Important enough, the materiality of this house, we decided to use volcanic stone from Indonesia, which are a little bit to describe like a potato. That means the skin is actually very rough. And we have used all that scheme of the potatoes, sort of speaking, for all the walls. And the inner part of the potato, we slice it and use it as the floors. So actually, all the materials used in this house is actually all local material. The timber is all from Indonesia, thick from Indonesia. And here we can see actually the contrast in between the floors and the walls. Once again, this circulation is taking us from the beginning of the project through a series of water bodies. These water bodies, some of them are used as fishes, as we can see there. Other ones are used for greenery, plantings. This circulation, it is covered because Indonesia have a very heavy rainy season, so therefore will be impossible to be completely open. Again, different bodies of water having different approach, and all leading to us to the very end of the property, which is where we begin to find, in this case, the dining room, and across the body of water, we are having the living room for this house. Again, the experience of the indoor and the outdoors are very important to us. Probably more important than the indoor spaces. We consider the climate conditions to be excellent. This is what happened very much in the living room. We have here two living rooms, the indoor, which is of course air conditioned, and the outdoor, which is completely unnatural. The body water, the swimming pool in this particular case, which is giving us the reflections and the movement, which we feel is very attractive to the environment. The dining room of the house, once again, taking the views of the golf course at the very end and the water bodies in front. Similar situation. Again, looking back into the internal courtyards, we are having a completely different greenery and different kind of elements, very much belong to Indonesia. And this is actually the access into the bedrooms, which are in the upper portion of the house. Once again, taking full advantage of the views, but in total privacy. General views. Little details which create the beauty of the space as well. The swimming pool of the house with the living room, and the evening shots and the lighting in the evening. From here, I want to take you to a house which was actually my first commission in India. It's a house actually here in Delhi. I must say that it was a very difficult project for me. Before this project, I was never in India before. And so it was a very long process for me to understand the culture, the idea of vastu, orientations, materiality. And if yet I used to read about India and the Mughals and all your pavilions and religious background, I really didn't know much about the social life in India. So it was to me a little bit of a struggle at the beginning, but at the end I fully understood more or less the need of this family. And again, was to me the first time that I designed a house outside the tropics. I mean, we are in a sort of a desertic situation. So the idea of using flat roof was a completely new language for me. The usage of the terrace as entertainment spaces was again something difficult, but we managed to put it together, I think so. And again, I mean, even yet, which is different from the tropical houses that we designed, the circulation was a very important element to link the different spaces and to be able to appreciate as much as possible the gardens that we were creating. I'm sorry, in this case, I mean, again, the vastu, which requested the entrance door to be facing the north, the puja room, which is in the upper portion of the house, facing the east, and so on. I mean, but somehow all these difficulties give us the opportunity to create this kind of circulation which benefited the house greatly. This is the upper portion. As we can see, is 4 different pavilions. The main pavilion for the owners of the house, the 2 other pavilions here close to me, I mean for the children, and the individual pavilion up there was a guest room. The language of the house was extremely simple. As we can see in the sections, I mean very simple horizontal lines. Once again, from the outside was a very discreet approach. People really are not able to see or to understand what is happening inside the house. The materiality in this case was actually to use travertine in a very solid manner, as solid as possible. And again, I mean, the use of some Indian kind of an element to us, which was created in this timber partition, which are actually enclosing, in this particular case, the puja room of the house. Again, I think so that the simplicity of the architecture was in many ways for the lack of understanding of Indian architecture. And I did allow the art pieces and the art collection that this client have to probably show the Indian aspects of the family. As again, very small sort of objects in these plinths that we have created, indicating the family background. The entrance to this space. This is actually the puja room, and how that screens, which actually are pivoting, generate this kind of shadows into the floors. Again, the circulation, which is actually going behind these glass panels, and the study room of the family through the same screen as the puja room. We can begin to see a little bit of the terrace, the usage of the spaces in these flat slabs. And again, I mean, the creation of a small sort of a courtyards as much as possible to allow light to penetrate into the home. But again, these spaces were enclosed by walls, just to give the necessary privacy that we wanted to create, not only from the outside, but from different people working into the house. Again, a little bit of my interpretation of steps, which I was fascinated with the water collectors that you people have in India. So this was actually my approach to be able to bring people from the ground floor into the main terrace, which was an entertaining space. Here we can see, I mean, how that staircase is leading us into a terrace space. very much to be used for entertainment. Here again, I mean, the living room space above, we can see an existence of a terrace. Different views of the house, the transparency completely into the internal courtyards. The use of water as an element, again, not only as a swimming pool, but basically to enhance the beauty of the space, the kind of reflection of the building. I found that it's very attractive all the time, the one use water. Once again, I mean, the solid travertine screen that we employ to divide the main house from the two children's homes was a little bit borrowed from, I mean, your jelly sort of screens. We wanted to create something which was solid and yet translucent at the same time. Again, different aspects of view of the architecture. We can see here the terrace space in the flat roof that we were not really familiar with, but somehow they became very useful. Again, the composition of the different buildings in the house. The connection in between the different houses were done with a very sort of light material to define each component very clearly. And again, this is what happened in the terrace. I mean, creating this elongated kind of a bench situation for people to really enjoy, especially the winter season. And I must say that the site have a privileged neighborhood, I mean, which have all this greenery, which people can enjoy. Hardly we see the neighbors, which is something very attractive. Again, the detailing of all these benches, I mean, to be able to control all the weather differences and so on. And this is actually, I mean, the evenings in the evening, which we begin to see, I mean, the transparency from the different houses coming all together. The same happened with the employee of that situation for the beams in the living room. The idea of separate actually the horizontal plane with the vertical planes. Again, we can see it here, I mean, the usage of all the different language in the architecture. And with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.